the whole of our thinking about who we are and what other people are has got to be restructured. Now look at this idea. Faced with the choice between changing one's mind and proving there is no need to do so, almost everyone gets busy on the proof. Certainly my experience, it's one of the things that makes a 360 so useful, you know, is you got data right in front of you. You are faced with the choice between changing your mind and proving everybody else wrong. Proving everybody else wrong can be tiring. So what do? How do you live in a place that helps you change your mind? What does that even look like? There are these two ways we can learn, and lots of us are used to this first way, right, where we learn more stuff, informational learning, more stuff comes in. We have this kind of cup of our knowing, we put some stuff in and then we put more stuff in. It's what most learning is like, really. And it's the kind of learning we know how to do the best. We understand it the best. We understand how to do it the best. But there's this other kind of learning that actually changes the form, transformational, right? It alters the shape of our knowing. And it's that helps us grow. You get a different way of knowing what you knew before. You don't just learn new stuff. You relearn that everything you used to know, you have to think about in a new way. And that's when your mind is actually changing. You don't just learn new stuff, but you change. But the thing is, we have these competing pulls in ourselves. We have a pull to change and to be curious and to be growing. And also that stuff's really unsettling. It's tiring and it's confusing and it puts you in a kind of a wobbly state. So I'm curious about what it is we could do, all of us, and how we could build into our organizations more space for that transformational learning. Because we know how to do the informational stuff. It's not that that stuff's not important. It's just we already know how to do that. How could we do the other? And the focus is this, right? Being willing to change allows you to move from a point of view to a viewing point, a higher, more expansive place from which you can see both sides. This is the core act of growth, right? So as you're thinking about what transformational learning might be, what's the action that makes it transformative instead of informative? It's always got that pivot, right? It's always got the pivot of moving from a place where you were to being able to stand above, watching. Okay? And I'm going to tell you a story to just ground it. A few years ago, my family and I went to the Grand Canyon. How many of you have been to the Grand Canyon? Look at that, that's so good. I talk to American audiences and I say, how many of you have been to the Grand Canyon? Like 10 hands go up. And I have to say, I was one of those Americans, right? I moved to New Zealand and everybody's asking me about the Grand Canyon. Is it worth getting off the plane? You know, on my way to New York City, should I go? And I didn't know. And now I have this accent in this new country and everybody expects me to be like the tourism bureau, you know? So the next time I was going back to the US to visit my family, we got off at the Grand Canyon. What's it like for those of you who have been there? Bob, have you been there?
No.
Aww. Case in point. For those of you who have been there, what's it like? Awesome. What else? Huge. Majestic. I heard scary. Tiring. So for me, with my son Aiden, you've heard about my son Aiden. My son Aiden at that moment was 6. He was 6 when we went to the Grand Canyon. Many of you have ever spent time with a 6-year-old boy. You take awesome, majestic, huge, tiring, you put that with a 6-year-old boy, and you know what you get? A terrified, neurotic mother. That's what you get. So for me, the experience of the Grand Canyon was staring at Aiden's backpack, right? Because we were walking, the kids wanted to walk down into it, you know, and there are no handrails at the Grand Canyon. There's no place to go but down, really. And I have one of those, you know, loving life, kind of curious, wandering boys, and he wants to look at the mules over here, and he wants to look at the edge over here and look down, and I realized I had this, talk about a point of view. I was locked in this kind of magical thinking that I had super mom laser beam eyes. And I believed that if I could keep my eyes on Aiden's backpack, he would come to no harm. And I would operate out of this kind of operating system or set of assumptions or beliefs or whatever, and I was operating out of this. And then every once in a while, I would think, you know, that's actually ridiculous. I would have a little conversation with myself as we were walking down into the Grand Canyon. And I would realize that Aiden was going to be safe. He wasn't 2, you know, he's 6. It's big enough to set some of the right boundaries anyway. And I didn't come to the Grand Canyon to look at a red backpack. I came to the Grand Canyon to see the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon is an extraordinary place. And yet I was spending so much time looking at the red backpack. And I tell this story not just to highlight my own neuroses as a mother. I tell this story, and to connect with some of my brethren in the seats. I tell this story because I think a lot of our time we spend looking at whatever the red backpack is that's in your particular life. And we lose the Grand Canyon. And the thing is, it's not always wrong to look at the red backpack. Sometimes you got to do that. Sometimes when you're doing this on purpose and it's a choice and you really are, you have to focus in, you have to have that kind of tunnel vision that gets you to a place, that's the right thing to do. But when it's not a choice, that's when you lose the Grand Canyon. So the question for me is, how is it that we can make this more of a choice? How is it that we can exercise the muscles that get us to the place where we can choose more often where our attention is? We can choose the vantage point we want to lead from, be from, parent from, have our relationships from. How do we get in a place where we have more choices?